2. And this is the Chickenfoot Podcast. You know we are the Chickenfoot Podcast because you can see in the corner we got the Chickenfoot peace sign saluting you. The 3-fingered salute. And my name is Judah Buddha. I'm here with Arthur Spooner. We're here to talk a little bit about comedy. How are you doing today, man?
Doing well. Ready for a good laugh.
Okay, all right. I don't know if this is going to be a good laugh, but it'll be at least a good chuckle.
Well, okay. Either we'll laugh with you or laugh with how bad you are. So it will be with you, though, the whole time.
I got you with you. Okay. Just come with me for a minute. Imagine a man was stranded on a desert island for 20 years when a Navy ship, you know about the Navy, right? Finally spots him. The captain comes ashore and notices 3 huts. Hey, what are those used for? The captain asked. Well, the hut on the left is where I live, says the man. And the one on the right is where I go to church. So what's the hut in the middle? The man sneers. That's the church I used to attend. What do you think? Good one?
One's pretty good. That one's pretty good.
What would you give it on the spectrometer of laughs? Between 1 and 1,000,000, which one? Which one?
1,000,000. You're on 1,000,000. Well, it's definitely a 10. You got a 10 on that one. You definitely got a 10 out of that one. Woo! I would say out of a 10, it's probably about 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's so what how does it fall on the quadrilateral? Because I feel like it's while I was building up, it's like this is weird setup. But it gets a good laugh out of both of you and I.
Well, I think we're one, because part of the quadrilateral reminding everyone is there has to be a common culture or understanding.
Mm-hmm. Right? Common language, common
something where
something in common.
Something in common. And there has to be some sort of surprise. Mm-hmm. Some sort of tension and then release, right? So part of the tension was like, okay, where's this going? It's kind of meandering.
Yeah,
this is not going to have a payoff.
Like, why are we talking about a church?
Yeah. But then the cultural thing is, really, you got to be a regular attended Christian or evangelical. I would say you have to be an evangelical because a lot of Catholics probably wouldn't get that because they just go to their parish.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of Protestant evangelicals know there's a lot of church hopping. And so they go from church to church to church, and a lot of people
church politics.
Yeah.
What? How could it be transferred to a secular culture, a secular experience? Because there are things. What are like? That's maybe a girlfriend or something. Like, that's my ex-girlfriend, something like that. Or is there an establishment that people often? I was thinking not bar, not really grocery store. That's my old grocery store. It doesn't really work.
I thought maybe, I don't know, coffee shop, or I was thinking maybe podcast.
Oh, that would be good.
Because
that's
people
the podcast
seem to jump around.
Used to listen to.
Yeah. Or, memes. Or something. It'd be tough. I think it'd be tougher because I don't know if there's anything in the secular world that really is equal to that same kind of mentality. Because part of what makes the analogy that it would have to translate into secular is that idea that you're switching church, but you're not supposed to be switching. You know what I mean? Like the idea of switching really isn't. You're not supposed to be doing that. That's just what people do. But in reality, you're supposed to find a place and stay there. That's supposed to be your home. You know, your spiritual home or something. So people use it too much.
So maybe there's a hint of scandalousness about it.
Yeah, too casual about something that's serious, and they're just kind of like too flippant and just easily they treat it too nonchalant. That's probably a better way to say it. I think they treat it a little too nonchalant.
Okay.
So now, when did you just switch the cameras there? Or
yeah,
something?
I just switched
is that what they see or is that what we see?
Both.
Okay. So.
Right.
Oh no! I'll just making sure. Just making sure.
Trying to show him a little extra today.
Yeah.
Well,
scandalous.
That's scandalous.
All right. So we last week I brought up the idea of picking some well-known things within comedy, maybe terms or props or something, and the origin of it, and we can kind of talk about where it started, how it developed. So the three that I picked, and we might not be able to get to all three, and that's fine. We can always do it another day and have some more. I picked slapstick, spit takes, and rubber chicken.
Now, slapstick is not we talked about I thought we were going to do props. What is slapstick is a type, right?
Is it?
Oh, well, which one do you want to start with?
Well, I can do slapstick.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Cause I'm curious.
Kind of piggybacks off of another one.
Oh,
so
what'd you find out about slapstick? Well, wait. Slapstick. Crap, that's the one I didn't do.
What's that?
So slapstick is a stick?
Yes, it is. So what I found out is that slapstick is an actual stick that you used to slap each other with.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So what they did was, like in theater. So they would like have two pieces of wood with like a small gap.
Okay.
And so say like they're sword fighting or something, they would hit each other and it would make a huge slap sound so the audience could hear it, but it didn't really hurt. Like it didn't hurt the other person. So they would be like, shack, 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 shack. So the audience could hear the slapping, right?
That's interesting.
And so that's where the term started. It was an actual stick, two sticks that they would tie together with a little gap in between so that it would smack. You know, sort of like you ever see those hands where they're like, basically the premise of it.
I have a slapstick at home. I'll bring it next time. But
that's a switch. I think that's a switch.
But so, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when I was a kid, we called that a whopper butt.
Okay, a whopper butt.
A whopper butt.
Whopper
yeah,
butt.
we had like so the thing I was referring to at home is like, you know, like wooden tongs. They're like flat and you can pick things up with them.
Oh, okay.
I use that on my kids sometimes because when I spank them with it, it doesn't hurt very much, but it sounds so loud. But you're telling me that's slapstick.
Yeah, that's where it is. And so that term just began to translate into just physical slapping, hitting kind of comedy.
Okay.
So, and it didn't always start as comedy, although that kind of piggybacks off of Rubber Chicken.
Oh.
So what they used to do is like gestures and stuff. They would, because things that would be readily available were chickens.
Okay.
You know, I mean, like dead chickens and stuff. And so they would use chickens and they would hit each other with it.
Like a dead chicken?
Yeah, like a dead chicken. They would just like slap each other with. And as a joke, you know, because you know, I mean, like it's like, I've got a sword and you've got a chicken, you know what I mean? And you're hitting them with the chicken. So it's kind of like a joke.
Yeah.
And sometimes they would use pig bladders too.
Ew.
And So they would like have a pig bladder with a stick, and they would like use it, and pig bladder also they would use as whoopee cushion too. So it was kind of like they used all these different things, and they basically used chickens and pig bladders with sticks kind of sticking out of them, and slapsticks as the same thing. That is like physical comedy, smacking each other and stuff like that. Let's see what else. Oh, until they came up with in the 1900s plastic and latex. So, and really the reason why I got popular was, like we mentioned earlier, there has to be a common culture, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the early 1900s, you have people coming from all over the world to the United States, and they speak different languages, and so they don't always speak the same language. They don't have the same culture. But slapstick was something everyone could understand because it was funny. Somebody getting slapped in the face with a rubber chicken, right?
So the rubber chicken and the slapstick were used the same way?
They were used the same way. And so then the rubber chicken, once it became, a chicken, period, was used the same way as a slapstick. But then when they...
Now, was this like a freshly dead chicken or like a rotting chicken?
I'm sure it was either or, whatever they can get, you know. It was just something that they could easily get their hands on, you know.
Yeah.
And then it just became very popular because... in the early 1900s, people were traveling more, and they didn't always speak the same language. But comedy, slapstick is easy to laugh at because you don't have to hear the words. Like the black and white movies, Charlie Chaplin, those kind of things. Even like the Three Stooges, like boom, bang, bang. You don't have to speak the language. You see a frying pan hit him on the head, and you're like, ah, ha, ha. Yeah.
And you know what that sounds like.
The rubber chicken just became a symbol of comedy because they used it the same way. They would like smack each other with it, or they would have, and it just kind of became a mainstay of like cheesy, silly, slapsticky kind of comedy.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder why they started calling that kind, like, I wonder why the slapstick, just because they always use that in that kind of comedy, in that kind of cheesy comedy, or was it like a mainstay of that kind of comedy?
What, the rubber chicken?
No, the slapstick, the stick.
Well, the stick was just used in theater generally. But then they started using it as a joke, like smacking people. And I think slapstick is probably an easier term to remember, and it's a catchier term than to say rubber chicken comedy.
Yeah.
Or pig bladder comedy. So slapstick just began to mean you kind of like, and plus when you hit somebody with a slapstick, it's exaggerated, but it doesn't really have the effect of what it's really doing. So it would say like it would hit people, but it really wouldn't hurt. You could feel it, but the noise was louder than the pain. Right. So it's the same way with that kind of comedy. It's the illusion that it's like pain and stuff, but there really isn't any physical pain going on. It's just physical pain kind of comedy.
I wonder if it kind of got it segmented off, and that's why it stayed with slapstick. Because like maybe like its theater sort of evolved. Like every time they use a slapstick, instead of using it as like a sword and dignified scene, like they started using it as like the comedy relief part.
Yeah. Well, I wondered if once noises began to be able to come in, like we're talking about the whoopee cushion and stuff like that. And so I think then that kind of stuff blend itself towards slapstick. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know if in a black and white movie, if you're trying to do a romantic scene and they go for a kiss and you're like a slap, like that probably wouldn't fit. But if they're hitting each other and falling down or running into a wall and it's like, it sounds funny.
Visually, a rubber chicken would have been way more funny, but I'm sure there's plenty of sound on theater, right? In the theater. And so that's probably where it got segmented off. That's interesting. Well, you bring up whoopee cushion. I want to transition over to
arts.
the joy buzzer.
Oh, okay. Close.
No?
It's the fart of the hand. Everybody knows that.
Well, listen. The joy buzzer was created by Soren Sorensen Adams. Now, this guy was like, I think what you read comics, right? Did you read how far back did you read comics?
I started reading comics. X-Men. It was like, when Wolverine was on X-Men. I mean, even though at the time I really didn't read the Infinity Gauntlet. I had one issue. Mm-hmm. That's around the time that I was kind of getting into it. That's when I got serious about it. I mean, I had bought comics before.
Yeah.
But I was mostly into G.I. Joe comics because, I played with G.I. Joes and stuff like that.
Do you remember the ads they'd put? I think it was at the end where they had little ads in it. Mm-hmm. Well, that goes back as far as 1928 when they would have little publications. A tiny market within, like a meta market within those publications, was that of little toys and stuff like that. And so as Sorensen Adams developed was this idea, like he wanted to do like prank type toys. And so he's the one who he's the one who invented the joy buzzer. You mentioned the whoopee cushion, the itchy powder, you throw on something or you put something in and it'll always be itching.
Yeah.
And these were all little things that he developed that he could sell, and produce and sell en masse, through these publications. There would be little advertisements, and he got famous that way selling some of these. So the joy buzzer itself is almost, it borrows technology from like a watch, and what it is spring loaded. You wind it up. So the common misconception is that it actually shocks. There's electricity involved. It's just vibrates. There is a little nipple on it that, when pressed, releases this two little things that go together like this that are held, that are in tension because of the spring. Yeah, and it vibrates.
It just startles the person.
Yeah, it gives like, whoa, what's that? Yeah, a little buzz. It gives them a little buzz. Yeah.
And it plays in the common instinct of when you are touching it, you jerk your hand away.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean? It startles you, and you're like, "What the?"
Yeah, well, and it plays into. I mean, if you think about it right now, we don't want to talk about all the things that are going on today, but it is lately. I've been thinking a lot about the handshake and how personal the handshake is, and how personal it must have been back then. Nobody, you talk about washing hands these days,
Yeah.
And washing hands and toilet paper were not a big thing back in the early 1900s, and so there was always a little like, I mean, my guess is there's always a little like, it's a little more personal. The handshaking was a little more personal, so having something in there was probably particularly startling. So,
well, it makes sense why people used to wear gloves a lot back then.
Yes.
Because you would see like all these top hats and they would wear gloves. And I'm like, you're just putting more clothes on. I don't understand. But now I think about it, people didn't always wash their hands. So it's better to have a glove that you can wash than to touch a dirty person's hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could still shake their hand.
So you can imagine you feel a little movement, buzz, movement, whatever. Pretty scary and funny. And that plays off the quadrilateral as far as the startlement, surprise. Yes, exactly.
And the tension as well, because part of the surprise is, because part of the tension is you kind of, it startles you, but the startle, it almost like your instinct is you're threatened somehow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because this is unexpected and it's your hand, it's personal, and you're threatened.
Right.
Then you realize it's not threatening at all. So that the release.
Yes, coming back to that regular thing we talk about feeling threatened, sudden feeling of threatened, quickly followed by
Yeah,
relief, quickly followed by relief.
What's the cultural piece in there?
I don't think there is,
I was going
except
to say that
for
it's the handshaking.
the handshaking.
So if
Yeah,
say like we do it now, you had it, and everybody fist bumped you. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't
It
be
was
able
like
to do it. Yeah,
valueless. It wouldn't have no meaning because if everyone just fist bumped, then they didn't shake hands, and it had
yeah,
no
you're
value.
right.
You know,
You're
so
right.
it had to play the cultural aspect is everybody shook hands. You know, that's how you greeted people. It was traditional, and even to this day, it's still traditional. Although I wonder if it will begin to fade away.
Huh?
Just the day and age that we live.
You mean the handshake?
Yeah, the handshake.
I've been talking to friends that think that the handshake, at least for politicians, is probably going to be an antiquated thing. But I did want to bring up, because the Joy Buzzer is more of a prank thing. When it became more mainstream, well, all these little slapstick things became more mainstream with the Three Stooges, but the Joy Buzzer in particular became synonymous with one particular figure in pop culture, and that is the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of his deadly weapons. Was the Joy? Of course, it wasn't just a little buzz; it was real electrocution, killed people. But it became sort of tied with the idea of the Joker. Probably, would you call the Joker a comedian, or like a type of comedian?
I don't know, because we talked last week. A comedian really is somebody who writes and performs and all that kind of stuff. So, but he's really performing for himself and writing for himself.
Except for in the movie The Joker, he starts.
Yeah, he is a stand-up comedian. But I mean, he does, and he specifically chooses all these old, antiquated gags. You know, like the chattering teeth, the gun that goes bang. You know, with the flag in it, the water and the flower and stuff. All these kind of old, antiquated kind of gags.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess he would. In his own eyes, he'd probably consider himself a comedian. And because he's writing his own jokes, he's trying to perform them.
Yeah. Now
his goal might be a little bit different, is to make himself laugh and not necessarily anybody else. You know?
Well, yeah. I guess I just thought it was interesting. You know, he's so tied with the idea of comedy, comic books, and it's this sort of Joy Buzzer whoopee cushion thing was just. There was a time when you couldn't separate them, you know, comic books and these. Even when I was a kid, I ordered a Joy Buzzer and whoopee cushion out of a comic book. It's just that's where you went to buy these things.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe just that's the very essence of the word comic book, is meant to be funny stories, and it's not meant to be like we take seriously, like a serious story.
Graphic
just
novel.
Happens to be, happens to be with Batman or something. But I wonder if that's where really the term comic book came from, is that it was meant to be funny cartoons.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's where it's, and see, that's where. So back in the 1920s, that's what it was. It was what we consider now comics, the comics, you know, like if you look in the newspaper, you have the comics section. Of course, nowadays, nobody really reads newspaper. I don't even, do newspapers even have comics anymore?
I still think so, but I think now you can access them everywhere.
Digitally,
so. Yeah.
Well, that's something I'd like to come back to, talk about comics and the comics. Not comic books, but comics in the sense of Garfield, and Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side. Like that should be.
Yeah, what was the first comic? Because I remember, like maybe a month ago, I rewatched Dick Tracy.
I think the very first one was like Little Abner.
Okay, because I remember that movie Dick Tracy, and I rewatched it, and I was like, oh man, that would be a good series. They could turn that into a nice series because it's got Dick all Tracy? These. Interesting characters, and the visually, it's all these colors. But anyways,
are you talking about comic book or comic strip?
It was a comic strip in the newspaper.
Yeah. So apparently, the very first comic strip was called The Yellow Kid, It's created by Richard Outcult, and it was
Sounds
in
kind of
the
racist.
1890s. Oh yeah, probably was.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's
Probably
about, but I'm
was.
guessing what it's about.
So, but that was 1890. So
1890.
by the time Sorensen's Adams came along, the whole comic industry, it surprised me that there was comics way back then, in these publications. They had newspapers, and I forget how old the institution of newspaper goes.
Yeah, well, once they got the printing press,
Yeah.
then the flyers. Actually, probably the first meme that was ever made was the "Live Free or Die Hard" or "Die Hard." Isn't that the one with the snake where it's cut into 13 pieces? Live free or die.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, so in the early colonies, to muster up support for the Revolutionary War, they had a snake that was cut up into 13 pieces, and each piece represented the state or a colony. And so if they were all cut up, they weren't together and they would easily die off. But if they were one together, they would be one snake and they would be lethal. So and they would print it out on these sheets and they'd hand it out and stuff. That's how Benjamin Franklin started. He was an apprentice to printing.
So you're talking about
join or die. Yeah,
join or die.
And you see the little initials there. Those are I think the states.
Yeah, North Carolina, Virginia, Massachusetts, Plymouth, New Jersey, New York, and New England.
Join or die. Yep.
Wow, fascinating.
Oh, you should have brought up all the little things, like a slapstick. I wonder what a slapstick comes up. What's the image?
All right, let's take a look.
It's probably going to Three Stooges. My guess is Three Stooges.
Slapstick. No, they actually have a slapstick.
Oh, yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. Oh, and they have Charlie Chaplin there, and
yeah, that's the interesting thing is a lot of the slapstick stuff got started before the Three Stooges with black and white.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it started with theaters.
I mean, Charlie Chaplin. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So type in there rubber chicken and see what people come up, or if anything.
Well, lots of rubber chickens.
All right. And what about the buzzer?
This is great television. Joy Buzzer.
What do you think's the very first thing? Okay.
Joy Buzzer.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh yeah, do you remember the gum? You pull that out.
Oh, and it slaps you with the.
Yeah, that's a newer, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I was a kid, I would go to comics and look at this stuff. So buy the stuff online, and this guy started back he started that whole trend. Instead of selling little toys and food and stuff like that, he would produce these pranks. What
was the first thing you ever bought in the back of a comic or one of those kind of ads?
First thing I ever bought?
Yeah.
It was a Joy Buzzer.
You bought a Joy Buzzer? Really?
I bought a Joy Buzzer, yeah. Whoopee cushion and a Joy Buzzer. Remember they got sent to me. I was out in the woods of North Carolina. I was out in the woods of Canada. Quebec, Canada.
Well, they're close. I mean, I know. North Canada.
I was in the woods of Quebec, Canada, and I had a bunch of comics sent to me, and I was getting big into comics, and in the back, they showed all these pranks. I have to say, though, it was probably one of the biggest disappointments of my childhood, because also, the other thing I bought were the glasses that you can see through people's clothes, the X-ray glasses.
Yeah.
I guess it was early little perverted Judah wanted to see. I got the glasses, and all it does is it just
it just makes things kind of blurry stuff, and you're like,
well, yeah, it
Everyone inside is blurry.
makes things double. It makes
Okay.
things double just enough so there's a little overlap.
Yeah. Well, I guess when I was a kid, I always saw I was like, that's not gonna be worth it. So the first thing I ever ordered through the mail was
It wasn't
really
worth it.
a GI Joe, like
Oh,
a
really?
Cobra Commander and those kind of toys. And to me, it was worth it because you had to save like these little. You had to cut this points, the GI Joe points off the box or the thing that you buy, and then you save up so many and you get whatever. So yeah, and that's the only thing I ever really ordered through the mail.
Interesting.
All right.
What is this thing called the spit take? I've never heard of that.
Spit take. Well, a spit take is so when somebody's taking a drink and they say something surprising.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I like how you're like, oh yeah.
I thought it was an object. I was like, spit take.
Well, it's kind of, you have to use water or food. So it has to, it is some sort of physical comedy. So obviously, it's visual.
Yeah.
Right. And so it started early.
Visual? Oh,
oh my goodness. So it started early 1900s. They kind of attributed it to this guy, Danny Thomas, and he was a comedian, stand-up comedian, writer, stuff like that. He had his own TV show way back in the days. I think it was like in the 50s and 60s and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of attributed to him a little bit, and that he did it so frequently, he kind of perfected it. But actually, on the I Love Lucy show, Ricardo did it first.
Oh, so, the I Love Lucy. When was that? That was back in the 70s?
No, the 50s. Way.
Oh, right. Yeah, 50s.
I Love Lucy. So Ricardo did it first, like a year before on an episode, and then Danny Thomas guy came along and he did it more frequently. And so basically it was to represent, it's almost like, because TV was smaller, right? So I think they had to be more expressive, sort of like, a little bit like your stage, you had to be a little bit more expressive.
In a compressed manner, though,
yeah,
right?
In a compressed manner. So just to express surprise, it was easy. It was a good way to kind of show a comedic surprise. Where you're doing something you normally wouldn't do, where you would spit food and water everywhere because you're so surprised, and so it just
spit take.
Yeah, spit take. And obviously, take is a TV movie term, take one, take two, and so they use like spit take and double take was like another thing.
Oh yeah,
like what? So they it was like those kind of things exaggerated so that your surprise and your emotion, it just overly expressed it.
That's interesting. The spit take, and maybe the double take, where it was used the most in my memory was reruns of, what's that show? The Jackie Gleason show. To the Moon, Alice.
Yeah. The the Honeymooners.
There we go. The Honeymooners. Yeah.
See, I always remember the double take in the Little Rascals.
Oh yeah.
With Buckwheat, he go, what?
right. He would like look at something and Well, no, but Spanky would do that because he was always so serious. He'd look at something like.
Yeah.
yeah.
Those all those things are really played into the physical comedy, and I think part of it had to do with not everyone spoke the same language, but physical comedy, you can understand the emotion that's being expressed, but you might not understand the language. If somebody said, "What the hell are you doing?" They might not understand it, but if you're like, "What?"
Yeah. I think remember we talked about doing doing some kind of creative project. I think we should bring back some of these old things that people don't do anymore, like the spit take, the double take, maybe some of these old pranks, rubber chicken, somehow make them relevant. That's a challenge, huh?
Yeah, well, I tried to take like old phrases and or old words and try to throw them in there because I think that they're funny.
No, but I'm saying we should do a short
Okay.
using all these things and trying to make like a challenge of trying to make them relevant,
Mm.
without just sort of recreating the old black and white style.
Mm.
Use these
How would you
old
update? Like, say, how would you? Because so like the buzzer, the
joy
hand
buzzer,
yeah, the joy buzzer.
hand buzzer.
You could change it to instead of like a hand, you might have like something hanging out of your knuckle.
I
So
don't
when
know.
you
We'd have
fist
to
bump,
think about
it'll
it.
like just kind of you
I
could,
was
and then you could squeeze, and then maybe something like poke them in the finger. You know what I mean? Like you have like a
yeah.
little something in your hand, and then go in between the fingers. And when you go to a fist bump, you just squeeze your hand, and it blows the
Yeah.
piece of metal, or and I'm like,
Could
what
do
the heck?
that.
That could be a modern version on it.
Or you could change the paradigm a little bit and have like a fake fist. So you go to fist bump somebody and just kind of crumbles when they hit it.
Mm.
Like a empty rubber fist,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of crumbles. Like, what the hell? I don't know.
You
We
have
have
a
to
fist
think
bump,
about
and then
it.
just go limp, go. Ugh. You ever shake somebody's hand and they're like kind of like short,
Yeah.
they grab the fingers, so you go
Yeah.
to fist bump, you're just like,
Well, that's the thing we used to do in high school. Is we'd say, "Hey, give me a fist bump," and you go like this, and the thing is, you go under like that.
uh. Well, I've seen the turkey.
Oh yeah, the turkey. I
They
forget
go.
how to do that. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing I was going to talk about was pieing, the pie in the face.
Okay.
So that's an old classic, going all the way back to what people think. Now, a lot of these old black and white movies got destroyed. They weren't really taken care of. It was just the kind of film and stuff they used was very delicate, and we have no traces of these old films. But apparently in 2000, way back in 2009, no, 1909 was the first play in which they used the pie in the face. It was I'm trying to remember what the guy's name is. He was popular back then. Ben Turpin.
I don't
And
know.
it was a film called, oh, it was actually a film, a 1909 film called Mr. Flip. So it must have been just one of those black and white movies.
Mm.
And in this one, Ben Turpin gets a pie in the face, and that's the first time anybody ever remembers that being a thing. And it got so it's been sort of a meme. No, it has been a meme of film all through the years. Of course, Charlie Chaplin made it popular,
Mm-hmm.
and then probably the most iconic is if not the Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
They similar comedy, but they came before the Three
Yeah,
Stooges.
yeah.
And then the Three Stooges just took it bigger, made it bigger. And then there was in Doctor Strangelove, it was used in a Stanley Kubrick comedy, like that dark comedy. I don't know if you ever seen that. He's like in the wheelchair and
Yeah.
he plays several roles. Not Kubrick, but I forget what the actor's name is. He played Pink Panther, but and then Looney Tunes for our generation is what sort of solidified it for us.
I could see it coming around, starting with. I mean, I'm sure someone throwing water in your face, like being mad, and they throw water at you.
Yeah.
Well, you take that to extreme level. What would you throw in somebody's face that you normally like a pie? Why would you take a whole pie that you would eat and you're like, instead of water where you're drinking, you just splash it in their face. You just take this whole pie and you waste a whole pie just slam it in somebody's face.
Yeah.
That would be the extreme of the water in the face.
Well, who really capitalized on this was Nickelodeon. They took it to you remember when they would slime people with the green slime? Well, they actually started in a show. What would you do with? It was a kind of a game show where if you got the punishment for losing was that you got a pie in the face, and that sort of evolved
Mm.
into the green slime. But the thing that is perfect about a pie that is basically just a pie pan and whipped cream is, like we've talked about all the time, is that aspect of suddenness and danger and
Mhm.
relief, because when you realize it's just whipped cream, there's very little that is as far as food that is
Softer.
gentler, I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say.
And then the
Yeah,
tin is like you could
yeah.
crush it.
Ding,
It's
ding.
so
Yeah, yeah.
easy.
But
So
it's
like,
like it's probably one of the it's floaty and
yeah.
delicious,
But in the
and
mind of the audience, it's an
it's
apple pie.
messy. It's
Yeah, it's
messy, and
messy. It's
it's a
heavy.
pie.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It
So
has that archetype of a pie, and you think of like, well, why would you waste a pie? But it's really probably the cheapest, most harmless thing, food you could put on somebody. It doesn't stain. It doesn't stain. I
yeah.
mean, and it tastes delicious. You know?
Hmm.
It's just such a. It's almost like throwing flowers in somebody's face,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
flowers that stick and make a obvious mess.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't sting the eye. Well, it probably stings a little bit, but anyway. So it's just a perfect prop when it comes to comedy.
Do you remember there was a trend maybe like 15 years ago, maybe more than that, where people used to do antiquing?
Oh, I still haven't. What?
Antiquing, you remember that?
Antiquing.
Where they would take a handful of flour and throw it in your face. And they call
No.
it antiquing. You never seen that?
No.
People would
What
say
was that?
And it was like early on, like when YouTube started and all this kind of stuff, they called it antiquing, like, like antique, something's antique or something.
You make something an antique?
Yeah, yeah. So they would take flour and they would just like throw it as hard as they can in your face, and it would poof. And then, obviously it would go everywhere. And then you open your eyes and you just see your little eyes. That was a huge thing of, like, you could find all kinds of videos on YouTube early on. Those are some of the pranks that people would do. They called it antiquing.
I don't remember that. Huh. Next time I see you, I'm gonna antique you out of the blue. Hey, Joseph. Poof. Except I'm gonna do it with nails. All right. So, do you have a funny story to end us on? We are almost out of time. We got about 10 minutes left.
I got two stories.
Oh.
One, I'm gonna let you decide.
Okay.
The first one is about poop.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to hear that one, but that one is the funniest of the two.
Pass.
And what?
Pass on the poop.
All right. Well, that one is one of the funniest stories that I have. Period.
Oh man, no, I can't pass.
Yeah,
on that.
it's.
What's the next one then?
Have I ever told you the hunk of turds?
Oh, I don't want to. I don't want to hear the hunk. I've heard it a million times.
Man, people love the hunk of turds.
We'll save it for a hunk of turd episode. What's the other one?
It feels kind of hunky turdy now.
No, it doesn't. I don't want to go from talking about delicious whipped cream to hunk of turd.
And the other one, all right. So the other one was in seminary.
Okay.
I think maybe I already brought this one up. The pregnancy magazine.
No.
All right.
Not on this show.
All right.
I know the story.
So I was in Barnes and Noble. I was going to seminary. I was living in Mississippi, and I was reading. I was at Barnes and Noble just doing some reading,
Mm-hmm.
And the only table I had empty was near the magazines.
Okay.
And one of my friends, Brian Graham, not the famous Brian Graham, but another one. So, that's Billy Graham. That's Billy Graham. No.
I'm like, Brian Graham.
You know these graham crackers, they're all over the place. So he comes up with some magazine, I don't know what it was, and he put it on he's like, hey, I think you forgot this one. It's like a joke, and I don't remember what it was because it wasn't that funny. So I was like, oh yeah, it's me. So he left, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to find the most appropriately inappropriate, because we were in seminary. We lived in the dorm. So the most appropriately inappropriate magazine, and I'm going to fill out the card with his name on it, send it out so that he gets a year subscription to it. Right? Yeah. So I found this magazine. It was called E-Pregnancy. I'm not even sure if it's around. And basically the front of it was like kind of women who were pregnant, but they were trying to be sexy about it. You know what I mean? So trying to be like, you know, so the one I remember is the lady's wearing like a wife beater, and she's like pulling it down, you know, and so the straps just kind of cover her a little bit. Yeah, and then the shirt says "Got Milk." Right. So I wrote his name on there and there must have been like 20 of us that lived in the dorm. It wasn't a very big seminary. It wasn't big dorms. And the way it worked is there was one mailbox. Somebody comes in, and then right as you come in through the door, there was just cubbies where everybody's name on, and you just put their mail into whatever cubby. So I put on there, Brian Papa Graham. And I filled out the thing and I sent it in because it was a free 9 months. 9 subscription. So it comes in and I totally forget. You know, that's sometimes to me the best pranks are the ones that I forget about, because then when it happens, I get to re-experience it all over like everybody else. You know, it's like a surprise to me too. And so the magazine comes, and so somebody saw it and they thought it was hilarious. So they put it on the coffee table in the living room. And so everybody sees it. Everybody's laughing. He's got Bryce, and he's always a good sport. He was a really good sport. So you could do these kind of pranks. Okay. So he was like, "What? That ain't mine. I ain't do that." Whatever. And I would be like, and they knew it was me, whether I said it or I don't know. Somehow he knew it was me, because I guess I was really the only person to do something like that. And so I was like, "Brian, you should read this. It's got a really good article on like afterbirth and stuff." And he's like, "Whatever." He would throw it out, and then I would like hide it, you know, and then I would slip it into his book bag. So when he goes to class and he brings out his books, he's got it there. I would hide it underneath his pillow or underneath his mattress. And then we would go on for like a week or something. Then finally it would get old. And then a month later, there'd be a new issue. And then we would start the whole process over and over and over again. So 9 months comes and goes. And it's still coming. Like, it's more than 9 months. It keeps coming and coming. And he's like, "Dude, you need to stop." I was like, "Man, it's in your name. I can't do it." He's like, "Oh, I'm not calling." He's like, "Well, then you're stealing these magazines. I only signed up for 9. So I made him feel guilty. And eventually it stopped. I don't know if he called or they just eventually stopped. But E-Pregnancy, and every issue was golden, because they would always have some lady on there, you know, like, and she's pregnant and she's like in like a fashionable pose or whatever, you know, trying to be salacious or whatever.
Well, did you do that to me when we were in college at Toccoa?
I don't recall. What did I do?
I don't know. I used to always get these publications. It was something like that. I didn't think it was somebody pranking me, because it was like pregnancy or something. If it had been like, you know, nasty stuff, I would have been like, someone's pranking me. But it just felt like it was the wrong, like they were putting, but they would always come in my box. You know, we had those little boxes, and it was embarrassing. People would hand it to me, you know, the guys, they'd say, "Oh, you got the magazine again." I'm like, "It's not mine, dude. It's the wrong box, bro." It's like I forget it. It was like Home Improvement or Women's Home Health or something like that.
Well, that wasn't you. Say like the person's name or current resident.
But this was at school.
This reminds me of when I was in high school. Yeah. And a friend of mine, Chris, this is the guy who's McDonald's uniform I tied into a knot.
Okay. You like tormented this dude.
So he was like, "Hey," because we had like this town was small, so this is before I have a license or anything, and so we would
Okay.
just walk everywhere, and the Kmart wasn't too far, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going down to Kmart to get a CD and stuff," and I said, "Oh, okay," and I had a jar of change, so I sat down and I counted it out and stuff, like quarters, nickels, and dimes, and it was a lot, and
Okay.
so much as like kind of weighing my pants down as I'm walking. But I had like $15 in there,
Okay.
$15 in change. And so we go to Kmart and I decided to get a CD and it was it was discounted. So it wasn't like a full $15, it was like $12 or something. So the lady rings it up and then my friend Chris is behind me. And so just so you know, he gets me back on this one. Okay. So this one is on me. This isn't on him. This is on me.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, and because the whole time him and I were joking, it wouldn't it be funny? I'm like pulling out all this change and stuff. Right.
Okay.
So I put that and she tells me it's like $13 or something. And I just started pulling the change up. And him and I are laughing and stuff, kind of giggling. And then the line starts backing up with all these older ladies. And so I'm starting to get a little embarrassed.
Yeah.
The lady is just kind of annoyed because she's the only cashier. And this is long before there was like automatic cashier. It was like you had to have a person do it. So she's counting it out. And my friend's like, it's like, good thing you didn't bring the pennies, like yelling really loud so that everyone stares at me. And I was like more and more embarrassed. So the lady counts it out and puts it in her drawer and she goes, you owe me $4. I was like, what? I was like, no, I had $15 there. She's like, no, you're down $14. She already put it in her drawer, so I can't.
Oh no!
So we're just standing like a standoff. I was like, well, I don't have any more money. You know what I mean? I pull it out my pockets like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, and the lady's like, just take it, just take it, just take it. And I'm like embarrassed, and I'm walking because all these older ladies are like,
what were you buying?
It's just a CD. And then as we're walking out, my friend Chris goes, and keep the change, you filthy animal. And I was like, dude, I was like so embarrassed. And then we walk out and there's a soda machine and he's like, he goes to get a soda. He's like, do you have change for 20? And he pulls out a 20. The whole time he had a 20, he could have totally bailed me out the whole time. And he didn't. And he just laughed. I was like, all right, I'll get you back. And guess how I got him back?
How did you get him back?
I tied his uniform in a knot.
Oh, that was how you did it.
That's what I did to get him back. I tied a uniform in a knot.
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a good story. That's a couple stories there. We get a little twofer. Get a little twofer.
A twofer.
Well, do you have any final thoughts? I was thinking next week we would talk about comic strips. Comic strips influenced us that we thought were funny, influenced comedy, the comedy we like, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Anything related in comic strips. What you thought was funny, influenced you? Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite guys to listen to these days, and just has been well, we'll talk about it next time.
Okay.
But do you have any final thoughts on comedy, on props that people have used in comedy?
No. I think it's really interesting how things start out, and initially things don't always start out because a prank is funny, but it started out like at the back of a comic book.
Yeah,
this guy really trying to just make some money, and slapstick started really as just kind of a theater thing.
Yeah,
but then became more associated with comedy. So it is interesting how just knowing the history of it, like even the rubber chicken, they just used real chickens and they would hit people. You know what I mean? Like just using a silly item as a weapon is like the joke.
It makes me wonder, as we get into an age that is less and less influenced by black and white and maybe to a further extent live plays and stuff like that. I wonder what our, what the kids or what the progeny beyond us is going to look back. Maybe everything will be live streamed, and they'll be
Mm,
like, oh, back when they used to like record things and edit things, they used to do jump cuts. Maybe
yeah.
jump cuts will be like something that they
Well, I
talk
think
about.
memes are definitely going to be a part of that because a lot of
Yeah.
times, like the cat at the dinner table,
Mm-hmm.
the white cat that's like kind of like staring,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like a meme. So they would have one scene where it'd be like the lady's yelling, and then the cat's like talking back, like, mm,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And I think that that's kind of like, uh, kind of like black and white kind of thing, to where it's kind of slapstick because it's very straightforward. You see a picture, two pictures
Yeah.
that are unrelated, and then you put them together, and all of a sudden now it tells a different story. You're
Mm-hmm.
taking it out of context and putting a whole new context around it.
Yes. Interesting.
So I wonder if
Yeah.
that's really what people are going to see and then also you had The Office where everything was kind of subtle looks,
Yeah.
humor
Yeah.
kind of thing, and that's kind of
Well,
like a meme kind of
at
thing.
one point, I do want to talk about that kind of sitcom because to me, and we've had this discussion. I don't believe that's a sitcom. The Office, Curb
Mhm.
Enthusiasm, Parks and Rec. What was the Arrested Development? These are all different to me than they have a different approach to comedy than a sitcom.
Mm.
Because we've talked a little bit already about sitcoms in the sense of Seinfeld and that, but I don't know. But next time we'll talk about comic strips and how they have influenced us. Bring your favorite one if you can,
Mm.
physically. No, I remember when.
I have it tattooed on my left nipple. So fortunately, we can start right now.
Sneak peek. You're
This
naughty.
feels right. All right, 32 skidoo.
32 skidoo.